I didn't get a chance to do some of the review questions in class, so I'm going to go through them right now. So if you have any questions, you can use this video to help you out. So the first one we're going to do is convert to vertex form by completing the square. So your first step is to move the number over. So pretend like there's no y squared. Set it equal to positive 12 because you would add it over. And then we can put in our plus blank and our plus blank on both sides. And then we can start completing the square. So half of 8 is 4, so I get x plus 4 squared. 4 squared is 16. And if I add 16 to that side, I have to add it to this side. And I get 28. Your last step is to move the 28 over. So your final vertex form is y equals x plus 4 squared minus 28. And your final vertex is negative 4, negative 28. Okay? Now we're going to try one with a number in front. So the first thing we have to do is, again, the same step. Move the number over. So we're going to get a minus 1 on this side instead of a plus 1 because we moved it over. And then you have to get rid of that 4 in front. So it's going to be 4x squared plus 8x because 32 divided 4 is 8 because I took a 4 out. And now that it's just an x squared, I can start my plus blank and my plus blank. Okay, so I keep the 4 outside and then I kind of just forget about it and I can complete my square. Half of 8 is 4. 4 squared is 16. But instead of just adding 16 to this side, I'm going to add 4 times 16, which is 64. Negative 1 plus 64 is positive 63. And then all I have left is to move that 63 back over. So my final answer is 4x plus 4 squared minus 63. Don't forget your y equals. And your vertex is negative 4, negative 63. Okay? All right, and then we did an example of these at the beginning of class, but in case you forgot, the roots are the opposite sign, so you get 3 and negative 5. You're going to skip the y-intercept for now, but the axis of symmetry, we can add our roots and divide by 2, which gets me negative 1. And that means we know the x-coordinate of the vertex is negative 1. So all we're going to do to find the rest of the vertex is plug it in. So I have negative x minus 3, x plus 5. And I'm going to plug in negative 1 in. So I get negative times negative 4, which is really negative 1 up front, times 4, which gives you positive 16. So the vertex is negative 116. And then the last step is to convert to general form. So I'm going to take my equation, negative x minus 3, x plus 5, and this is the general form. And the first thing you want to do is FOIL. So I get x squared plus 5x minus 3x minus 15. So I get x squared plus 2x minus 15. And then I still have that negative 1 outside, so all I have to do is distribute it. So I get negative x squared minus 2x plus 15. That's my general form. And then the last thing it asks me to find is the y-intercept. And the y-intercept is just that last number, 15. Okay? All right, then we go to vertex form, and this is vertex form, so we know the vertex. It's the opposite sign inside, so it's 1, negative 3. The axis of symmetry is just the x-coordinate, so it's x equals 1. And then all that's hard on this one is converting to general form. The piece you want to do first is the x plus 1, x minus 1 squared. And squared just means you write it out twice, and you get x squared minus 1x minus 1x plus 1. So you get x squared minus 2x plus 1. And then I still have a 2 outside. And I still have this minus 3. The next step you want to do is distribute this 2. So you get 2x squared minus 4x plus 2. And I still have to deal with that negative 3. So my final general form is y equals 2x squared minus 4x. I can combine these two and get a negative 1. And the reason I would convert to general form is I now know my y-intercept is negative 1. Right, and now on to the last one, which I think is somewhat the easiest because it's already in general form, so I know the y-intercept is 10. The axis of symmetry is negative b over 2a. which is negative negative 8 over 2 times negative 2, which gives you 8 over negative 4, which gives you negative 2. So your axis of symmetry is x equals negative 2. I know the x-coordinate of my vertex then is negative 2. So my final step is to plug that in. So it'll be negative 2 times negative 2 squared minus 8 times negative 2 plus 10. And you can type that straight into your calculator. However, I don't have a calculator. So this part gives me 8, because 2 squared is 4 times negative 2, so negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 2 is 16 plus 10, so I get negative 8 plus 26, which is 18. So the rest of my vertex is 18. Okay, so make sure you know what to do when on each one of these. And then we'll move on to the quadratic formula. This one's actually a pretty easy one, but the first thing you have to do is plus this 5x over. So you get 3x squared plus 5x plus 2 equals 0. And now that it's equals 0, the first thing you want to find is b squared minus 4ac. So I get 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times 2, which gives me 1. I type that in. So now I can plug it into the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus and minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I get negative 5 plus and minus, I already know the square root is 1, over 2 times a, which is 3. Okay, so I'm almost done. I get negative 5. I know the square root of 1 is 1. Okay, and this is an example of one that I can actually split up because I know that the square root of 1 is a nice number. So I get negative 5 plus 1 divides 6 and negative 5 minus 1 divides 6. That's a 1. Okay, so I get negative 4 over 6, which is equivalent to negative 2/3. And I get negative 6 over 6, which is equivalent to negative 1. Okay? And that's going to be an example of a quadratic formula that's easier to simplify. When you get down to square roots, you can't simplify it, so it's just going to be like negative 5 plus and minus the square root of 4, or not 4, that's a nice number. It'd be like negative 5 plus and minus the square root of 2 over 6, and you couldn't simplify that. But since it's the square root of 1 is a nice number, you can simplify it. All right, then we move on to the powers of i's, which I didn't get to, but you want to remember your cycle. I is I squared is negative 1, I to the third is negative I, and the most important one is that I to the fourth is 1. Okay, so I squared is negative 1, I to the third is negative I, and I to the fourth is 1. So what I like to do is I like to subtract off something that's divisible by 4. And if you're really stuck, I suggest you just stick with subtracting 40 because I to the 40 is divisible by 4. So that means anything that's divisible by 4 is 1. So 95 minus 40 leaves me with 55. I can subtract off 40 again and I get I to the 15th. And then I ask myself, what number is close to 15 that's divisible by 4? So 12 is the number I can think of. So I end up with I to the third left over. I to the third is the same thing as negative I. Again, if you're stuck like I to the 146, I would start with something basic like 40. So I'm going to subtract off 40. I'm left with I to the 106. And I'm just going to keep subtracting 40. And the reason I picked 40 is because I know 100% that 40 is divisible by 4. And anything that's divisible by 4 is 1 because it's just a cycle. Okay, so it's I to the 66. I can subtract off another power 40 and I'm left with I to the 26. And then I ask myself, what number is close to 26 that's divisible by 4? And I think of 24. So I'm left with I squared. I squared is equivalent to negative 1. And then I get I to the 57. So I'm going to stick with my 40. That leaves me with I to the 17th. And I think, what number is close to 17 that's divisible by 4? 16 is. So I'm left with I to the first, which is just I. Okay? So you really want to look for anything that's divisible by 4, and whatever's left over is your answer. Okay? Complex arithmetic, you want to really focus on when it's adding versus multiplying, like number 1, 2, and 3 are all just combining like terms, and number 4 is one where you actually have to FOIL. So this one, you just add like you would normally. It's 9i. Same thing with number 2. 2 and 5 are like terms. They're both the real components, so that's 7. And then 3i plus a negative 2i is 1i. What I like to do first on number 3 is distribute a -1 so I remember that it's being subtracted. So I get a -6 and a -2i. And I didn't change this one, and now I can combine my like terms. I get 2 minus 6, which is a -4. And I get -5i and -2i, which is -7i. So that one's again just combining your like terms. Number 4 is the only one we have to FOIL. So I'm going to FOIL my 6 first, or distribute my 6, and I get excuse me. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times -4 is -24i. Now I'm going to distribute the 2i, so I get plus 6i minus 8i squared. And the one thing you want to point out is that I squared should never be in your answer because we know it's -1. So I get 18, 24, -24 plus 6i is -18i. And this turns into just a plus 8 because I squared is equivalent to a -1, which changes the sign. And then the last step, 18 plus 8 is 26. So I get 26 minus 18i. So remember, the top ones are just combining like terms. The bottom one you have to FOIL out, okay? And we don't ever divide complex numbers. We have to get rid of it by multiplying by the conjugate. So the conjugate of the denominator is 3 minus 4i. You just change that middle sign. So if I multiply on the bottom, I have to multiply on the top. And this is where your FOILing comes in handy. So I get 9. I always do the bottom first because I know that my i's are going to disappear. So I get 9 minus 12i plus 12i, and that shows you that your middle terms cancel. And then I get minus 16i squared. Those cancel. The minus 16i squared is the same thing as plus 16. So 9 plus 16 is 25. So I know my denominator is 25. All I have left to do is the top now. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times -4i is -8i. -15i. And positive 20i squared. And I'm just about done. I just have to simplify the top. So -8i and -15i is -23i. And then 6 plus 20i squared is the same thing as minus 20. Okay, so 6 minus 20 is -14. And my denominator is still 5. And this is an example of one that cannot be simplified. Okay. All right, and the last couple I think we just have, we're not going to do the application one. So the last one is just simplifying. So anytime it's a negative, you automatically know you're going to get an I, and then you can make that positive if you take the I out. So the square root of 36 is 6. So you get 6i since it's negative. This one's not negative, the square root of 80, so we're just going to have to make our little tree. And I'm looking for numbers that are perfect squares, so 4, 9, 16. 80 is divisible by 4, I know for sure, and that's the square root of 4 times the square root of 20. The square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 20 is the same thing as square root of 4 times square root of 5. Again, the square root of 4 is 20. I don't know the square root of 5, so I multiply these two. So I get 4 root 5. And again, this one doesn't have an I in it because it's not the square root of a negative, okay? Now the last one I'm just going to talk through, okay, because I don't have time to do all of it. So the application problem is going to have a lot of parts, and it's the same stuff we've already done. You just have to know when to do what. So when it asks you for the initial height, that's just asking you for the y-intercept. So that's just 5, because that's in general form over there. When it asks you for the height, all you're going to do, the height of the object at 2 seconds, you're just going to take your equation, but instead of writing t, we're going to plug in 2 for t because we know the time is 2, and we get our answer. Okay, you can calculate that. When it says when will the object reach its maximum height, you have to use the formula negative b over 2a, because what it's really trying to get you to find is to find the vertex, and we're looking for the x coordinate of the vertex on part C. We're looking for the y coordinate of the vertex on part D. So the first part gets you the x coordinate. So you're going to do -40 divided by 2 times -16. And I believe you get 1.25 when you do that. Okay. And then you're going to take that answer and you're going to write your equation again. But instead of writing t, we're going to replace t with 1.25. And then you just have to calculate that to get what the maximum height is. And then the last two are the quadratic formula because it's asking you when the object will hit the ground. So it's saying when is your height 0? So you take your equation, set it equal to 0, and then you find the first step you do is b squared minus 4ac, and then the second step is you plug it into the quadratic formula. And then the last problem is the same thing, except now we're looking for when the height is, oops, my board's blinking. Give it a second. Still blinking, so we're just going to say talk through it. We would set our equation equal to 10, but then we'd have to move the 10 over. So it has to be equal to 0 before we do the quadratic formula. So you get negative 16t squared plus 40t. And if I put 10 instead of 0 and I minus it over, I get a minus 5. And then you would do the quadratic formula. So it looks like this instead of blinking. You'd set it equal to 10, and then you'd minus the 10 over. So you get negative 16t squared plus 40t minus 5 equals 0. And then you do the same step. B squared minus 4ac, and then you plug it into the quadratic formula. Okay. All right, hope that helps. Test us tomorrow. Have a good night.